Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of Radio Unplugged, brought to you by WRTH. I'm Sakshi Srivastav. I'm the marketing manager here at WRTH, and I'll be your host today. Whether you're tuning in live or catching the replay, we're thrilled to have you here with us. Radio Unplugged is our monthly conversation series where we put the spotlight on voices from across the globe, broadcasters, DXers, engineers, and passionate hobbyists who help keep the spirit of radio discovery alive. Today's guest is someone whose journey combines all of that. So, welcome, Nick Langan. He is a lifelong radio hobbyist, licensed ham operator, FM DXer, software engineer, and currently also an editor at Radio World. He also developed the RadioLand mobile app, which maps FM signals across North America, and he's become a favorite for many DXers. Before we begin, I'm also very pleased to welcome Gunter Lawrence, who's the CEO of WRTH, and he will be leading today's conversation with Nick. Gunter brings in decades of experience in the global radio and publishing industry, and he's also an active advocate for keeping the passion of listening alive in the digital age. With that, I'll hand things over to Gunter to kick off our discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Sakshi, for the introduction. Welcome, Nick. It's been a while that we've not been talking, but I remember we had very, very good discussions about all things radio, which I always appreciated. But you never told me one thing. How did you start listening to radio?
Well, first of all, Gunther, I thank you for having me. I'm truly honored to be here. I mean that. Yeah, it is. Like many things, I could probably expound quite a bit, but I grew up in the '90s, and I credit my dad. He had several different shortwave portables. I remember specifically a Sony ICF SW100S portable one. It's actually really small, but had a cool looking digital screen. He had bought it for shortwave. And I definitely remember through an old WRTH, I want to say maybe 1991 edition, trying to get the BBC, Radio France International, China Radio International, a couple of different networks. But I remember honing in on FM, and maybe sort of a theme of mine, my passions. My parents always listened to the smooth jazz FM radio station. We grew up near Cleveland. It was on 107.3, sort of a rim shot signal, the term for station just quite outside the metro. So we would sometimes get interference with where I lived on the eastern side of Cleveland. And I remember one specific instance where a station from Western Pennsylvania, a co-channel station, came right over it. So some of those early experiences, and I always carried around a portable radio. I want to say for my 10th birthday, I got a police scanner monitoring the VHF, UHF bands. You could listen to like cordless phones back then. The McDonald's drive-through window to the person taking the order, you could pick those up. So I always loved that kind of propagation. But it wasn't until age 10 moved to Jersey. There was more coastal tropospheric ducting nearer to the Atlantic Ocean that occurred in Jersey. So I started getting into those openings. I always thought the cap, though, was probably about 400 kilometers or 250 miles. And it wasn't until another theme I'll mention, a lot of people in the long distance radio hobby are also into weather, meteorology. You yourself, Gunther, I'm sure you're aware of this. So I happened to be on a weather message forum. This was now fast forward to like the early 2000s. And I met a gentleman, a very close friend still even now, who wasn't too far from me in South Jersey, who recommended I get an APS 13 element Yagi. So I went from, portable car radio to 13 element antenna. So I went from like 0 to 100. And that's kind of how I got hooked. And so now from 2005 onward, I feel like a large part of my repertoire has been FM DX. There's been a lot of changes. We could talk about that a little bit, a lot of good. Obviously the band has been more crowded, but I love it. every season offers a chance to hear new things, and the technology has sort of breathed new life into it. So it's been a large part of who I am today, and I'm very grateful for that.
Okay, that's really kind of a great growing up with radio, and I like the idea of the combination of radio and weather, because as we know, there's some strong influence of weather on propagation, especially on higher frequencies. And okay, the ionosphere perhaps is not part of what meteorologists would look at, but it's all about physics. So I think it's also a very nice part of the hobby of understanding the world around us. Now, you started as a listener and then became a DXer, and you ended up not ending, but you then stepped into developing an app. How came that?
Yeah, so it's all sort of interconnected, which I think is cool. All my family's from New Jersey in the eastern U.S., but I mentioned I grew up in Ohio, so we used to take these trips multiple times, at least per quarter, per season, from Ohio to New Jersey, and this was during the 1990s. And so, pre-internet or pre-mobile internet, it was difficult to know exactly what you were hearing in the car. I'd have a good idea. There were some more trade-oriented publications, the M Street Journal, that listed the radio stations. I didn't have the money for that. So I was always curious, we're taking these car trips, what was on the FM band? Obviously, fast forward to the 2000s, there's plenty of websites that list that kind of information now. Radio Locator is a good one that's been around since 2001. And I have used FM List since 2011. My whole logbook is on there for DX. If I didn't have FM List, I would not have a logbook right now. So that has been a huge part of my repertoire. But I was thinking sort of in the terms of the traveler and by proxy, the DXer. What about just a mobile app? iOS, Android, obviously so many have opined on how the iPhone changed everything, and we're still dealing with those repercussions today. There wasn't exactly a mobile app that just for the purpose of, if I entered a location, speaking from the North America perspective, what FM stations could I reasonably hear if I turned on my radio and try to make those predictions a little bit more accurate than just extrapolating FCC contour data. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, maintains a database of contour points of where you could reasonably expect to hear a station with a different 60 dBu contour, 54 dBu contour. That's fine, but I wanted to see if there was something a little more accurate. So I sort of obtained, just through a network of contacts, was able to get into the Longley Rice propagation formula. Time tested. It's been around since the 1960s. The FCC still uses it today. And that was sort of the backbone for RadioLand. And all this I got to do, I'm into my 30s now, and I was able to go back, very lucky to be able to finish my undergrad degree at Villanova University, my alma mater. And then for my graduate program, I started in 2020, I was able to do RadioLand as my graduate thesis. So for credit, I took a couple of semesters, started in 2021. By February 2022, I was able to finish it, put it in the Apple and Android stores. And I'm really happy with how it came out. There's all sorts of features I'd love to add. But the bottom line is, what it can do. You give it a location, US, Canada, Caribbean. You can set different thresholds. It's linked to the FCC database, the ISED database in Canada, and it'll factor in directional patterns, which is very important. A lot of broadcasters in North America use pretty funky directional patterns, which affect signal. And the beauty of Longley Rice is it factors in terrain, which, Gunther, I know you well know, terrain is everything as far as signal propagation. And that's sort of the core concept of RadioLand, and was able to do it for academic credit. which was a very beautiful thing. So very much kind of fulfilling a dream, and also being able to do it, before the current, it was not produced with AI. That's, that is one certification I can make. So.
Okay, I see. Yeah, and I remember I had the chance to read your thesis, and it was impressive because it's really, I mean, I've seen theses which are just a couple of pages, but yours is really, it's very extensive, and it goes into all kind of details, really from broadcasting, from broadcasters view and down to all the challenges on the IT level, using the data, calculating, using the Longley rise, doing a nice user interface, and also bringing it through the hurdles of the app stores and various stuff. So I think it's really, it's been an excellent ride that you did, and you already also explained how it helps. And if I understand correctly, it's something that both a normal, so to say, listener can use. So wherever you travel in the US and North America, you can take it along and see what would be on your local dial. And what also it's also a tool for the experienced DXer, because it's up to date using the data from FCC.
That's correct. What's been gratifying to me, when I released it, I really didn't know, exactly who would be, the primary stakeholder. Right? Doing this as a software project, you got to keep in mind, who are your users? Who are you targeting? You got to come up with a list of requirements. And the problem with any project, just like a software project, you don't want that scope to keep expanding, so that, we're going to do FM stations. Maybe we can include no other radio stations. Maybe you could include, something I'm looking at now is trying to include medium wave stations. But the sweet spot seems to be broadcast engineers here in North America, which is very cool to me. They are obviously a group of people that's very savvy. They know the industry, they know the tech, they want accurate specifications. So the fact that they would enjoy using it, I think is a beautiful thing. But it also definitely, I feel, has obvious long distance hobbyist implications. Let's say you're getting an e-skip opening from here in New Jersey to Topeka, Kansas. You could tap in Topeka, Kansas as a location, get that list of stations. You could filter it by different field strength thresholds. Maybe I only want the signals in Topeka that are above 60 dB. It can limit those. It'll show the programming format and slogan. So between that and there's a myriad of search options as well. So I feel like, you can't please everyone. And that's one thing too. If you try to please everybody, you'll please nobody. That the old saying is true. But I feel like understanding it's a niche, it bridges the gap pretty well. And you're only as good as your data, and is able to work out some workflows. I expounded upon that in the endless thesis as well, to import data daily from the FCC and Canada. So it's cool how it's come out, and it's all hosted in the cloud as well. So taking advantages of the technology available too, which I feel like is a beautiful thing.
Mm. Yeah. And if I'm correct, it's free.
It is totally free. Maybe,
and I guess currently it's also ads free, so it's really not annoying. Okay.
It is maybe not the best from a profiteer perspective, but that when I embarked on it, that's what I wanted to do. Keep it unintrusive. I feel like people will appreciate that. And I don't really have any visions of changing that. I have, certainly debated putting it on the web, those sorts of things. We'll see. But, the biggest thing is just, this is data that is publicly available anyway. So why not make it available to folks in a mobile app version? And that's kind of what I'm doing. And what's cool is sort of paying it forward. I get to adjunct as a computer science professor. I'll be doing a class at Villanova in the fall. And I've actually got a student as a research project over this summer. I've been virtually meeting with him every week, who's trying to work on a neural network model using machine learning, training the model with Longley Rice data taken out of the RadioLand app to potentially, we'll see exactly how it turns out, make sort of a lightweight model based on those Longley Rice propagation predictions. So, that's something I always wanted to explore as a student. It's a lot easier to get into those technologies now. So I hope to keep paying it forward, and maybe that gets into RadioLand someday. We'll see. But that's sort of where my interests lie.
That's really exciting. That's really exciting. Now, you mentioned the broadcast engineers being professionals. When you joined Radio World, you also entered into this professional world. How has that been? How did it happen, and how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, it getting back to sort of the interconnectedness of this all. Radio World did a feature on RadioLand after I published it. This would have been fall 2022, which I was very grateful for. And I remember sending Paul McLean, editor-in-chief at Radio World, some answers to his questions. And I guess he liked my responses. I've always liked writing. If you asked me, full-time journalist, I don't know if that would have been the first thing that came to mind. But he liked my answers, and I started doing some freelancing. Columns in 2023, 2024. Then I started doing some web articles, but more and more. In particular, I covered a story last year. Western North Carolina got devastated from Hurricane Helene, flooding, very unprecedented for that area. And I was able to talk to one of the broadcasters at 570 WWNC, one of the AM stations there, for a story that I thought turned out really well. And that sort of set into motion. They had a full-time position open up. It was just the right time for this kind of thing. And for me, getting to write about this industry, topics that I would be reading anyway, it just made all the sense in the world. And so one of my first assignments last year was going to the National Association of Broadcasters big convention in Las Vegas. They had 55,000 people come, and it's usually, whoever, is a player, quote unquote, in the industry is at that convention. And, I got to cover it in their newsroom, and we also, our parent publishing company, Future Publishing, runs the NAB show daily that they hand out to all the show goers. So that was awesome. And you get, very much connected. We have a lot of contacts in broadcast engineering across North America, across globally too. And we do a lot of stories related to that circuit, more in terms of like gear they're using, AOIP to get studio to transmitter content sent, what current transmitters are looking like, cloud automation, not to mention all the things that are going on with the Federal Communications Commission right now. It changes on a daily basis. And we have a great team. Paul is our editor. Elle is our assistant editor. And I invite anybody who's on the call to sign up for our free email newsletter, the Radio World Smart Brief. We work very hard on it. A lot of content on a daily basis. So it's been great. It's nonstop. And what's also rewarding is I get to do a regular feature, The Signal Spot, which does a lot of DX related content. I just did a story on the FMDX.org folks, Nubish and Chef, all the awesome stuff they're doing with the TEF. That's been a really popular article. That was a dream to be able to write, because I use that TEF, quite a bit. And I feel like they're sort of revolutionizing DXing right now. So to be able to have a space to be able to write that kind of stuff, how cool. And people seem to like it. And, the one thing, Gunther, is like in that Discord, and there's a lot of young folks. And I know, one of the themes in broadcast engineering and in broadcast in general is it's very hard to get young people interested in all this. Well, they're doing something right. And I feel like that's where it's at right now. So
right.
Just a little bit of what we're doing.
Yeah, I can only confirm that. I think that the TEF being technology, which is around since 2.5 years, it's really revolutionized DXing. And as you also said, it's brought along of young people. And when I see these young guys doing stuff and talking about it and discussing it, I remember when I was young. it's the same energy, it's the same thrill,
Totally.
it's the same fascination of what's going on. It's it's the same laws of physics. It's the same interest in the hobby. So that's really great. You mentioned WRTH when you introduced your how you started DXing, and I think you mentioned 1991 edition. What role has played WRTH in your radio journey?
Yeah, I would honestly say, and I credit my dad, who I lost last year. So the last year has been a lot of ups and downs. Started at Radio World, great, but then obviously everything that goes with losing your father is tough. But I definitely credit those early moments setting me to where I'm at today. And so I remember he had that Sony portable and at least one edition. I'm pretty sure it was the 91 edition of the WRTH. And so I would just consult that. And I specifically remember the days I spent most scanning for shortwave stations were days where I called sick out of school. Like that was like the sort of hand in hand. I've got this extra time. Let me take the Sony out and try to scan the shortwave bands. And so I would just go up and down the list. Got the 25 copy right here, and try to get whether it was Deutsche Welle from Germany, the BBC, China Radio International, but different shortwave networks. And I would spend a lot of time, day and night, but particularly on days off from school. So I feel like that very much set me in motion for long distance listening. And what's so cool today, and finding out, about the revival, if you will, of the WRTH is that, it's linked here with all the data into FM list that you maintain, feverishly with, you could just go down different states, get frequency lists for both FM, AM, and there's TV listings in here too. So that is, that's been a resource as I do my DXing in the 2020s. I've got a lot of different, I've got 4 different SDRs, 4 different Yagis in my backyard. So sometimes I've got so many different tabs open on my computer that it's awesome to be able to have this by my side and just look up different states and see what I'm hearing. So to be able to keep this going the way you have into the 2020s is just beautiful. And it brings me back, to kind of why I do all of what I do today, having this in the palm of my hand. So, but you've also embraced the new platforms, which you've got to be able to do today to stay current with the WRTH website, the mobile app as well. So I feel like that's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a book in the hand is sometimes it feels very good. Now let's have that's my final question. Let's have a look into the future. What, in your opinion, what changes or innovations would you love to see for DXing, for radio, for the radio landscape, for the radio world, for the radio space in the next years? What's your outlook on the future?
Well, from a DXing perspective, it's sort of a paradox. On one hand, I think this is certainly true in North America. It's probably true in Europe, at least to an extent as well. I know there's a lot of DAB penetration in Europe. On one hand, the radio band has never been more crowded to try to DX, particularly if you're close to a metropolitan city. There's not a lot of open channels, and inherently, to be able to hear long distance signals, you've got to have some open channels. So that that is a frustration. I know a lot of folks, gave up the hobby the early to mid 2010s because of that. So I totally get that. Where I am, I'm 30 miles east of Philadelphia and not terribly far from New York City. So that's a challenge, no doubt. But I also feel like the barrier to entry for DXing, it has never been lower because of the TEF receivers. We haven't even, gotten into SDRs and what they're capable of, whether it's the AirSpy, whether it's everything SDR Play is offering. And so depending on which receiver you're using, that can offer a good deal of front-end rejection, so that you could use it close to transmitter sources. The AirSpy HF Plus is pretty good with that. And then, as a result, there's one SDR in particular that I use quite a bit, the RSP Duo from SDR Play, which supports 2 antennas and has combined diversity mode. And so what that allows you to do is, if there's a semi-local, maybe some sort of interference source, you can null that out. And it's pretty magical what it does. So the new technologies are great. I feel like my one concern is there's, several different, separate SDR manufacturers, which is great. Competition is great. I would like to see maybe a little bit more of a unified front, because, this is still very much a niche as far as FM DX goes. Wouldn't it be great to have diversity mode in the AirSpy, or the FM canceller in the RSP Duo? So, I think the fragmentation is a little bit of a concern, and I worry a little bit if that might be stunting some of the growth of the SDRs a little bit. Just things to pay attention to. But for a new DXer, tap into the TEF radios, fmdx.org. In a matter of days with the TEFs, you can be hearing some really cool stuff. Hook it up to a web server. Very easy to configure that. I think it sort of combines the open source software approach with long distance listening. So the tools we have are great. I hope there's a little bit more of a unification going forward. And as far as radio in general, as always, I feel like we need to lean into the local aspect of it all. That's easier said than done. But I remember predictions, Gunther, in like the early 2000s that radio would, in 10 years, be gone. It's still here. Let's embrace the local aspect. That's the best thing I can say. That's not always done. I would love to see more of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great outlook. Thank you so much, Nick. We could continue talking, I guess, for the whole day. Now it's time for questions, and back to Sakshi.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nick and Gunther. We have one comment in the chat from Jim. Jim said, I have to admit that I do not use RadioLand very often, but it's very beautifully designed and it's very accurate in describing the FM signals that I can hear from my home location. Well done. I would be interested in seeing a medium wave version too.
Jim, I'm figuring out the approach for that. Longley Rice, it would not be the formula for the medium wave band. So in terms of trying to get accurate predictions, or at least semi-accurate on medium wave, that's what I'm dabbling with right now. But it's something I'm working on, I can tell you that. But thank you. I'm glad you like it, and I appreciate you checking it out.
Okay. We have another comment. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, from Guidos. He said, in fact, I expected a talk about fmdx.org while you just published a very interesting article about it.
Yeah, at fmdx.org, and big shout out to Nubish and Chef, the two sort of chief organizers. Chef is PE5PVB. He is in the Netherlands, and he is sort of the chief architect of the firmware that a certain facet of the TEF 6686 radios, the silver metal version in particular. They're also building headless TEF versions that you just connect to a computer and you can stream over the web server, which is what Nubish designed. I can't say enough about what they are all doing. They have a lot of passion for crafting certain features into the TEFs, and they've created this Discord community that has more than 2,000 users now worldwide, where you can just hop on, connect to the Discord, and then from there you can ask questions. They're very helpful. There's users of all ages, but as Gunther and I were talking about, it's a lot of it's a very youthful community. And they also have a guide, because there's, the one thing, there's many different TEF receivers. It's an automotive chip that dates back to the early 2010s. That's very sensitive, very selective, and they were able to craft firmware that takes advantage of that sensitivity, selectivity. Probably the best feature is lightning fast RDSD codes. That's what DXers love. If you're trying to identify a station, it's in the middle of programming. How am I going to tell what the station is? The RDSPI code, which is worldwide, it's different format depending what country you're in. That is a game changer. And they've developed different skins. There's a built-in database right into the firmware. It's great. So, fmdx.org, and do check out my story at Radio World, because I detail, sort of the formation, what they're doing, how it's bridging the old and the new. To me, that's kind of where it's at. And I totally agree. Having Nubish and Chef on a conversation would be a great idea. And I know they're already, Gunther, tapping in with FM List as well. So they're very innovative. And I was very happy I was able to do a story with them.
Thank you so much for answering that. We have one last comment we can address from Werner. Unfortunately, RadioLand is not available in my region. Any plans for a worldwide version?
That is something I go back and forth with. It's a challenge. Obviously, Gunther, I know you're well aware too. It's to have accurate data on a global scale is tough. So the reason why it's not available in different countries is, as a result of it only has North American data. So Canada, US, Mexico, the Caribbean, Bermuda. And what I was finding is somebody from Egypt would download it, they'd not be able to use it, and they would leave the all-important negative review. And obviously, you want to get as close to I think we're 4.9 on Apple, and those Android users are a tough crowd. We're like 4.7 on Android. So as a result, I had to remove some countries from where the App Store and Google Play publish it, which I don't like doing. That's that's an open question, but we'll see how it goes. I think the biggest thing when you do a product like this, you want to get it right. You want to maintain the scope, but I am very receptive, and I would never put a capper on any of that. So.
Thank you. Gunther, you have a point you want to mention?
Let me add to that, Nick. If you remember, we had some discussion about this in the past, and perhaps it was not the right moment in time. I think you're right. Having accurate data worldwide is challenging. This is what we at FM List do, what we at Radio Data Center do, what we at WRTH are. It's all about having accurate and complete data on a global scale. And there's no problem with RadioLand because it's still called RadioLand. If we do a global version, we need to call it Radio Planet, and then we are done. So I'm open to picking up this thread with you first in private, and then let's see what comes out.
I would I would love to, I feel like there's a lot of possibilities there. What they are, remains to be seen, but let's as they say, take that offline, as they say.
Right. And thank you, Werner, for asking, because it's something, if nobody asks for it, there's no motivation to think about it. But if people ask for it and look for it, so there's good reason to consider it.
Fantastic. So this wraps up today's session. A big thank you to you, Nick, for sharing your time and insights, and to Gunter for guiding the conversation. And of course, thank you to you all who joined us from around the world and asked brilliant questions. The replay of this session will be available on our YouTube channel, our Community Corner on the website, and in our next newsletter. If you're new here, don't forget to check out WRTH's full offerings, the web app, ebook, official merchandise, and the WRTH printed edition, all built to support radio enthusiasts and professionals year-round. We'll be back next month with more stories, more voices, and more passion from the world of radio. Until then, take care and happy listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Sakshi. Have a good time, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much for having me.